Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. This is Reservations, and I'm Jeremy Blair.
And I'm Rain Wayland. That was a better intro, buddy.
It was better. Yeah, I fucked up the other one. It's fine. I'm okay. I'm not like crying. Not that anyone can see, but
not upset about it.
Nah.
Yeah. I asked Ashley before we got started if I picked a good shirt for this, and she's like, "Sure. I mean, no one's gonna see it." I was like, "Oh yeah."
Oh, whoops.
Whoopsies. If anyone's curious, I'm wearing a new Daredevil shirt that I bought, but it's something.
You could probably put a picture of it on the.
That's true.
On the YouTube, you know what I mean? Put a picture of it.
That's true.
It's a cool shirt.
So yeah, it really is. It's really long, and it didn't shrink when I dried it. Like it covers my pockets.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel like the fashion of the girls wearing really high up shorts and then a really big shirt, so you can't tell if they're wearing shorts or not. That's what it makes me feel like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's a popular style, man. You know?
I guess.
I mean, yeah.
I could never pull it off.
In me, if for those of you who are, curious, I am dressed exactly like Josh Brolin from Goonies. So picture that, headband, the, gray sweatshirt with sleeves cut off. Like,
oh my god, I didn't realize what you were doing.
So that's what I'm wearing.
Oh Jesus Christ!
If anybody is curious,
I didn't catch on to what you were doing immediately, and then I was like, I don't want to ruin the bit, so. But I think you can know. I was like, wait. Well, speaking of this episode also being like last week's episode, audio only, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watched the season premiere, because it has 78 views right now.
That's quite a bit.
Listens on everything are probably drastically lower. 5 plays. But but on YouTube, people apparently seem to like the fact that we're not on camera.
I don't know how I feel about that, but it's fine. Like I get it. Sometimes you just want to listen.
Honestly, I think it's mainly just because we did the zone of interest, and so that's real big right now, and so I'm sure people searching for it. I would hope got a little snippet of us, and then saw just a green background, and we're like, "What the fuck is this?"
Yeah, and
then clicked off.
Yeah, I don't know. Like 78, that's pretty good.
It really is. It's number 4 in our top 5 most viewed.
Wow.
I told Ashley that, and she was like, "Wow, that's really good." She was like, "I'm assuming number 1 is still." I was like, "It's still Shaun of the Dead."
Yeah, it's still Shaun of the Dead. Yeah.
Don't know how we pulled that off. That will forever be a mystery. Yeah.
It sucks when you don't know what you're doing, because then you have a hard time replicating success.
Well, and it doesn't help that we don't have an audience that tells us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong.
It's a good point. I did get a lot of very positive feedback from Zach, so from Zone of Interest. So we may have just crushed Zone of Interest. It might be just that easy,
Look. Like what we were talking about the other day. Like, I felt like we did really good. We really knocked out Zone of Interest really well, which is a good segue to hopefully we can keep the heat up with this one.
Keep the momentum going.
Yeah. So everyone, this week, episode 2 of season 10 was my pick, and for, I would say, a long time coming, because I feel like we've talked about this movie a lot, but just in passing. Today we are doing Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. So Jeremy, I'm gonna ask you because I kind of already gave my story of how I first saw this movie because I really wanted to see 2049, but I hadn't seen the first one, so
Yeah.
I had to see the first one so I could see 2049. Um, but do you remember when you first saw this?
No.
That's fine.
Uh,
I'll take it.
Not at all. I don't remember at all. I remember I was vaguely aware of it, I suppose. Um,
Yeah, I would
and
agree.
then and then I remember when I think it must have been in '07, um, when the final cut came out and they were putting it on, DVD and Blu-ray, and they were releasing it. I remember thinking, huh, because the way they were talking about it was like it was a new movie, you know.
Uh huh.
And I go, but that's impossible because look how young Harrison Ford looks. You know what I mean? Like this
Yeah.
isn't new, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so I remember that being confusing. But other than that, I was like, oh, okay, that sounds like fun. And then I never watched it. And then I couldn't tell you if it was in high school. I couldn't tell you if it was in college, but it was one of those. And I watched it. It was great. You know,
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. Really, I loved the way it looked. I I was obsessed with this sort of cyberpunk neo noir sort of, you know, I guess it'd be like a cat and mouse chase, or or sort of like this cool sci-fi detective story that felt
Yeah.
like a classic '40s film noir, right?
Mm-hmm.
We will do another movie very similar to that later in the season, without the sci-fi.
Yeah. Yeah. I like yourself. Like I'd known of it. Like I'd known in passing the name Blade Runner. Um, I'd always been told that it was like a seminal uh sci-fi film, and I was just like, cool. I have no interest to see it. Um, which honestly is baffling because now that I have seen it and seen it multiple times, I'm like, how could I have ever skipped on this movie? But I don't
Right.
know, like it's something about it just never really struck me as a sci-fi film because as we were just kind of talking about off mic, um, my introduction to sci-fi was Star Wars. So I thought that's what all sci-fi should look like, should feel like,
I
and
see.
also had Harrison Ford. Um, but I don't know, man. But yeah, I absolutely love the film now. I mean, it is slow, especially compared to 2049, which what we will do later. Um, 2049 is definitely a little bit more fast paced, but you're right. This kind of almost hard boiled detective story that just happens to be set in what the 80s thought 2019 was going to look like.
God, and they nailed
Um,
it.
all the flying cars and
The constant
use
rain. Yeah.
yeah, and using was it was it Mandarin as like, because I know like Firefly uses Mandarin as like the universal language.
Yeah. That's
Um,
right. But I don't
is that
know
what they
what it
were?
is in Blade Runner. They were
Yeah,
probably alluding to, that. I
yeah,
mean, it's obviously everywhere, right? In the writings and like on all the stores and stuff like that.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I don't know. They were probably alluding to that. Yeah.
yeah. But okay. So before we get into everything, Jeremy, since you did a synopsis of your pick, we'll do one for Blade Runner. So Blade Runner, based on the book by Philip K. Dick, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? The film, I can't tell you about the book, but at least the film follows our main detective, Rick Deckard, played masterfully by Harrison Ford, is put on a case to find these replicants, which are androids of this universe, um, who have fled an off-world colony and came back to Earth. Replicants are illegal on Earth because some replicants killed humans, and replicants are being used as slavery slave labor. So of course, repressed, oppressed beings. Anyway, so they risk it all to come back to Earth because these particular replicants only have a 4-year lifespan, and they want more life because they have begun to have their own feelings, their own emotions, their own memories. And it's the argument of, well, what makes me so different from you, a human? But anyway, so Rick is just kind of set upon this path to track down these replicants, and as a Blade Runner, that's the name of the movie. He has to retire them. No one can see my air quotes. I don't know why I specifically try to get them in frame. Retire them, execute them, and then the case is done. But along the way, he encounters Rachel, another replicant, who kind of, I would say, shakes his belief in maybe what he's doing as a Blade Runner. All that to say, he manages to succeed and finish the case. All the rogue replicants are dead. And he decides to not retire Rachel and run away with Rachel to start a life together, because it's kind of implied that Deckard may be a replicant, although that theory is shot to hell with 2049. But that's Blade Runner.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So where would you like to begin?
Well, I'd like to begin with sort of the philosophy of Blade Runner.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
What makes a person, right? What makes a human, right? That's the whole thing that encompasses the entire story. And what I love about Blade Runner and how it uses its characters is Deckard, before we're alluding to him being a replicant, it doesn't really matter because, let's say, like at the beginning, we assume he's human. That's fine. However, the way he's being used by the department and the way that he's having to do this case, even though he doesn't want to, and he's just being told what to do and he's following orders, he might as well be a replicant, right? Because he is a tool for the police department, right? He is constantly just being used to complete a goal, right? As if you would, use a toaster to heat bread, right?
Yeah.
However, on the flip side of that, you have Batty and company. I think this probably is Rutger Hauer's greatest performance ever, right?
I read some trivia and he said this is his favorite. Well, R.I.P. Rutger Hauer. He did say it was his favorite performance ever.
I mean, without a doubt, right? It's his best. And on the flip side of, Deckard just being a tool for, other people to accomplish goals, Batty is going against all of what he's been, I guess, technically programmed to do, or was built to do. He is pushing back against all of that. He wants to live, right? I think that what we see with a lot of these replicants, when Deckard, for instance, when Deckard murders or retires, I think she's a stripper. Is that what she is?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
So when he shoots her the first time, she stumbles, she falls, but then she gets back up again, right? And she's still trying to get away. She's clinging to life, right? Because she doesn't want to die, right? She's terrified of death, or at least she's thrilled with being alive, right? And that's what's so interesting about these replicants, is that their will and determination to keep living, right? And Deckard that doesn't seem to be his motivation, right? Deckard seems to be the antithesis of all of that. And to answer the question early, I 100% think that he's a replicant, and I don't think that 2049 disproves that.
No,
But that's fine.
no. We'll get there. Or we'll save that for the 2049 discussion.
Fine.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because, Deckard, for all his faults, not wanting really to take on the case and honestly kind of being a bit of a douchebag, he does at least follow through with the case, like, I mean, granted, yes, he has no choice but to actually just do the case, work the case, but I mean, he is good at it. He
I
is
mean,
good at
technically, I
being.
guess technically he does, but I think that he does have a choice because he chooses not to retire Rachel, right? Because he falls in love with Rachel.
That's true.
And
That's true.
so, like, I don't know, again, that makes it seem like, um, again, he's just going with, he's just following orders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And also, going off of that just a little bit, there's Edward James Olmos's character who's just kind of there,
Gaff,
almost
yeah.
kind of keeping Deckard in check,
Yeah, he does sort of appear, right? Especially at the end
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
he retrieves his gun for him.
Uh-huh.
It's like,
Yeah,
where the hell did he
but
come from?
but all that to say, like, again, with the philosophy of this movie, it really is like, well, like you said, like, what makes a person, like with Leon and his pictures,
Yeah,
that's something that he gravitates to, and he makes him feel whole, like a normal person would. That,
right.
that's what brings me joy, are my photos, or spending time with, something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really challenges, like, well, what, just because these people were created, manufactured, doesn't mean that they're less than. But when you're living in a world that says they are less than, what can you do?
Yeah, because again, it's once the story is completed, you sort of realize that it doesn't matter. Like, sure, it's fun to think about, is Deckard a replicant, right?
Yeah.
They give evidence for it, whatever, who cares? But then it's like, it doesn't matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if he's a replicant. Um, and it doesn't matter if Rachel wasn't, right? Or if Batty wasn't. Like, it doesn't, because these are beings that have feelings and hopes and dreams and emotions, um and one is just, honestly, like, I kind of agree. It's weird because you kind of do agree with Batty a little bit, because he's really just fighting for existence, right? He just wants to exist
Mm-hmm.
without having to be this thing, right? Or this tool, or this slave in this case. um
Mm-hmm.
and of course he's angry, justifiably angry, right? and yeah, I think that, in terms of, what makes a person, and what it means to be human in this case, you can be a biological human being, or you can be a replicant, and that still makes you human in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, because, we see throughout the film, we see both sides. We see replicants doing horrible things, but we also see them being, friendly with one another and friendly with other humans. And then we see Deckard do the same thing. We see him do horrible things, like when he openly kills can't think of her name, but yeah, the stripper with the snake.
Yeah.
He kills her in public, but then he has those moments with Rachel where he's letting himself be vulnerable with her, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think you're right. It doesn't matter because both parties are capable of both things.
Yeah.
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 Um.
So, I want to talk about the look of the film.
Okay.
I think that in terms of the cinematography, the set design, the tone, the feel of this world, right,
Mm-hmm.
is what The Crow should have been, right? Like this is what,
Okay.
you know what I mean? Like this is
Okay.
what it should have felt like, because this is, I mean, it's dystopian a little bit, right? It's that cyberpunk
Uh-huh.
dystopian. Um, it's obviously like if you can't afford to live off world, you're stuck here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it does sort of feel like they're on a failing planet. Um,
Yeah.
and I love, okay, so in the opening of the film, the shot of the eyeball, which I really liked,
Mm-hmm.
it's supposed to represent sort of like a Big Brother type, right? Like the all-seeing
Okay.
eye, like they're always under surveillance, and this is sort of a time where it's like sort of, it's not the land of the free, right, anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like, it's what I assume that's what that means. Um, and you're right about the mixing of culture and languages, which I thought was
Mm-hmm.
really interesting.
Yeah, especially
In this
with
film, because it's Los
yes,
Angeles.
yeah, it's supposed to be L.A. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. But yeah, because it's because multiple times we see a lot of Asian characters. I can't discern if it's Chinese, Japanese, or
Right, right,
but
right.
we see a lot of Asian characters in text. There's a lot of actual Asian actors in the film.
Yeah.
Like James Hong, for instance, who
Mhm.
I love very much.
Yeah, he's great.
Um, um, and yeah, it's almost like this melding of cultures. But I think you're right. I think this is we're supposed to know that this is a dying world.
Yeah.
Um, especially with and I never knew this, which would make sense now that I know this. Um, all the animals are dead, or at least
Oh yeah.
going extinct.
Yeah.
Um, which I never picked up on that the first time I saw the movie, and then I read that and watched a little bit of it on the documentary, Dangerous Days, and they're like, yeah, most of the animals have gone extinct.
Yeah, and
I'm
I
like,
really like how they allude to that in dialogue, because
mm-hmm.
Rachel asks about her owl, like, do you like my owl? And when he says,
Synthetic
is it
or
that
artificial.
she's like, of course it is. you know,
Well, and then he
um,
does it again with the
the
snake. He's like,
snake.
"Oh,
Yeah,
is this a real snake?" And she's like, "Do you think I'd be working here if it was?"
yeah. If I could afford a real snake, you know. So you're right. That's fascinating. The fact
Yeah.
that animals are kind of gone, and they're it's a little bit worse in 2049,
Yeah.
because they talk about trees in that one. um,
Yeah. 2049. 30 years later from this, the world has not gotten better.
no, it is substantially worse in terms of um, living beings on the planet not being there anymore.
On the planet Earth, it's not getting better.
So
Um
you mentioned James Hong, and I love James Hong as well. I think he's great.
yeah.
Um, I really like this moment in the film where Batty goes and visits his James Hong's character. And what's really interesting is it's the antagonist, right? The this, I don't know, fully fledged, what seems to be, like we've discussed, he's a fully formed being, right? He has, determinations, he has hopes, he has dreams, blah, blah, all this stuff. And yet,
Mm-hmm.
when they go to see James Hong's character, he makes eyeballs
Mm-hmm.
for the replicants. That's his job. That's what he does. And he casually mentions that, that he makes eyeballs and that he designed the ones that Batty has. Right? And so then you
Mm-hmm.
have this sort of this feeling of, oh, that's right. Batty is just this machine, right? This man-made structure. And it's so bizarre to think about that way because up until that point, he is, I mean, yes, we hear the word replicant and we hear that he's, artificial or whatever, but, in terms of just watching the movie, he's just our antagonist, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's just our foil for Deckard. And so when we get to this scene and then we really get to think about, the implications of this guy making eyeballs for replicants and that he more than likely made the ones that Batty has in his head right now. It's so bizarre to think about. And it sort of, makes you, take a step back and rethink of Batty's his, oh, what would I say? His intentions, you know, his plan, his desire for this revenge or his desire for retribution for what's
Mm-hmm.
going on up there, because what's going on off world. Because you're reminded that he's a machine. I really like that that they added that into the movie. I thought it was awesome.
Well, and and we get it again when they meet JF Sebastian.
Mm-hmm.
JF Sebastian is genetic coder,
Oh, right.
and so he tells Batty, oh well, there's I designed the genetic code that is probably in you, and it is fact because I think those are those times where they want to remind us, hey, he's not a real human.
Yeah.
He's a manufactured human. And again, yeah, I agree with you. It's very interesting. It's almost like they Ridley Scott and the screenwriters, they want to snap us back like, hey, he's not a flesh and blood human.
Mm-hmm.
He's yeah. But I also like those scenes too because
Yeah.
it's yeah. So okay, I want to talk about uh Rachel, because it's
Sure.
almost like when Rachel enters the picture, everything starts to kind of shift for Deckard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because she does throw him off. I think if she could have answered that last question on the test without hesitation, I think I'm pretty sure he would have thought for sure that she's a human. Because as Tyrell is talking to him, how many replicants go through the questions before you realize they're a replicant. And I'm sorry if everyone can hear that. Otis has been so ornery lately. I don't know what the hell is going on with him. Anyway, that like normal replicants maybe only make it 20-30 questions before they break, and Rachel did, what was it, like 119?
Yeah, they're there for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really think if she wouldn't have hesitated, I think Deckard would have written her off like, oh yeah, you're human. But it is this. He almost is kind of fascinated with her. Deckard is.
Well, and she doesn't know. She doesn't know
Yeah.
that she's a replicant, right? And that's new. Normally, replicants know that they're replicants, and that's fine, right? But she doesn't
Mhm.
know, and that's really fascinating, right? Because now we have this new kind of replicant that is unaware that they're artificial,
Mm-hmm.
which also has some implications to it. And yeah, it's fascinating, right? Now, I will say that, and this is fun because it brings us back to 2 seasons ago. Um, the way you can tell the replicants um, through cinematography and through the visual language of the film is their eyes, right? They shine.
Mm-hmm.
And this is developed by Fritz Lang and a cinematographer. His name, I have it here, is Eugen Schuften, and it's called the Schuften process. Um, it's the way that they have a like a mirrored glass mounted on the camera and how they have it angled with the light to shine on their eyes. Again, it's develop. I mean, isn't that crazy? Fritz Lang is
Yeah.
still affecting film for all time.
Yeah. Yeah, I read that today. I was like, oh man, I knew. I was like, Jeremy probably already knows this, but like, I hope we bring it up.
Yeah,
Um,
and
because yeah,
there is a scene where Deckard's eyes shine too, but that's fine. People say it's a mistake. It's not. This movie is well too put together for that. It doesn't matter. So yeah,
I may have to rewatch it now.
so what I also love about determining whether someone is a replicant is basically a Turing test, which is what Deckard's doing, right? For those who don't know, the Turing test is a test to determine if artificial intelligence can pass for like biological intelligence or what we would classify as real intelligence or real consciousness. And it's named after Alan Turing, who did the whole Enigma thing and that the computers that cracked the German code in World War II. Um, and they say like if you can't tell that you're interacting with something that is artificially made or man-made, then it is past the Turing test, right? And that's essentially what these interviews are and what these interrogations are, which I really kind of liked. And I also like that they look at their eyes and they're measuring like I guess pupil dilation or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's very it's almost like Terry Gilliam like technology. What they have, like the whole whatever magnifying glass thing or whatever it is.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say because certain moments did feel very Brazil-esque.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah. I love the test. Especially when, and I'm gonna mention 2049 again. When it comes back in 2049, but it's altered to just see if a replicant is in like is not going to rebel,
Right.
which I also really like.
It's basically recalibrating a replicant, right? Which you're right, I do like.
Yeah, man. But yeah, so Rachel, and I love that through Rachel we get the kind of the plot points of, well, how am I a replicant? I have all these memories. And to use a more recent example, since you and I have seen it from start to finish, X-Men 97 with Madeline Pryor and Jean Grey.
Yeah.
Madeline Pryor was the clone of Jean Grey, but they don't know when they were swapped, and they have the same memories. So whose memories were whose? And I've always loved that bit of storytelling, especially in sci-fi, because it's like if if memories are what make us, then how did you get those memories?
Sure,
You know?
right? Because that's how people learn, is through memory, right? And that's
Mhm.
how people, grow and change and become, I guess, either better or worse. Um, but the idea of planted memories, um, and them not being reliable is really interesting because, I mean, in a way, like if you were to think about something that happened last week, I mean, theoretically, you can't prove it, right?
Yeah.
I can't prove that actually happened to me. I can remember it, but what good is that, right? And especially when you think about it in this context, it's really interesting because there'd be no way to know that they're planted
Mhm.
memories, right? And so, you do feel for Rachel because it's like, what they're doing is sort of like experimental, and can we get a replicant to believe that they're real, right? And if
Mhm.
they believe they're real, then they probably won't. They're less likely to rebel. They're less likely to become violent and kill other humans, right?
Yeah. Um yeah, which again, that kind of plot point comes back in 2049 in a really major way.
It does.
Um which is kind of the big focus of 2049. Um but yeah, it is almost like Tyrell, who's also the barkeep from The Shining,
Yeah, that's right.
who we're pretty sure is the devil. Um but Tyrell, it almost seems like Tyrell isn't giving up on replicants being on Earth. So what if I can make a more subdued, almost indistinguishable from human replicant?
Mhm.
We're going to test it on this one Rachel and see if it works. Now it's never really stated how she finds out really that she is a replicant. I mean, I know Deckard tells her, well, no, these are planted memories. They're implants. Um, but she doesn't seem to really, at least for me, in the context of that scene, believe it. And then
Mhm.
we get word that she is missing, and
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah, I don't. Honestly, I'm thinking about it right now because I trying to remember specific instances where she comes to the realization for herself that she is a replicant, and I am having a hard time doing that at the moment. But it's been
Yeah,
several
because
last movie.
she saves him from Leon almost killing him.
Mhm.
Um, she plays the piano at Deckard's apartment, and says, I have these memories of lessons, but I don't know if they're mine or Tyrell's niece. And yeah, it's never, I feel like that's, I wouldn't say a plot hole, but it just feels like some context that may have gotten left
I
out
think after a while,
accidentally.
just Rachel seems to trust Deckard and trust that he's telling her the truth, right? That she is a replicant, and those are planted memories, um, and we do. Again, we're talking a little too much about 2049, but we do, realize that people use real memories. These aren't fake memories; these are real people's memories that they put in these
Mhm.
replicants, right? Um,
Well, and you're right. We do keep bringing up 2049, but it's because 2049 does such a great job of, again, I'm not saying plot holes in Blade Runner, because Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 were written by the same guy,
mhm,
but it seems like definitely with 2049, Hampton uh, Faulkner seemed to figure out how to fill in these little holes that that Blade Runner, the film we're talking about, kind of left, like with implanted memories and things like that.
mhm.
Um, because again, yeah, Blade 2049 fills in these holes really, really well.
Yeah.
Um, but again, we'll get to 2049. Now I do want to mention this.
Sure.
Even though I love the character of Rachel, and it is so fascinating, and of course the implications of her character draw more questionable actions. She's hard for me to take seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Just because growing up, the first thing I ever saw Sean Young in was Ace Ventura.
Is that right?
Yeah, she's
I didn't know she was in that.
yeah, she's the captain of the police in Ace Ventura, and then of course revealed that she had a sex change, so using that 90s wit to make a transgendered joke. She's also Chani in David Lynch's Dune.
Oh, that's right.
But no, but I do love Sean Young. I think she is a very versatile actor. Of course, she's also in your favorite show, West Wing.
Yeah, I love the West Wing.
But no, sometimes it was hard for me to take her seriously because all I could see was
Jesus.
her trying to beat the shit out of Jim Carrey.
Unbelievable.
But again, you're right. The character of Rachel, all the implications of what Tyrell was trying to do with her, again, draw more questionable actions because it's kind of fucked up that she doesn't know that she's a replicant, and that these implanted memories from his niece she thinks are her memories, and
Right.
it's fucked up.
Yeah, no, I agree. And yeah, and then of course Deckard getting a sort of a different view on replicants, right? Because again, he's just retiring replicants left and right. You know what I mean? And until he meets and falls in love with one, and then it's sort of cliche, right? It's Pocahontas, it's Dances with Wolves, it's Avatar, right? That's what that is.
Well, and and to put it in context of what the movie is also, which is a noir film, she's our femme fatale. So
She is. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so of course he would fall in love with her.
I don't know. Even though Pris, I think, is a little bit more of a femme fatale, in the fatale sense, I suppose.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Daryl Hannah.
Daryl Hannah's great. Another incredible performance in this film. I think everyone's really doing their best.
Well,
here.
and
I guess maybe instead of Edward James Olmos, which is just there. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and this is a good segue. It's because, man, again, it's Ridley Scott. People tend to show up for Ridley Scott. Even the movies he makes after this, with like Gladiator and trying to think of other examples of ones I've seen. I can list other examples like Napoleon, but I haven't seen Napoleon yet.
Well, I can help you. Let's see, Ridley Scott. I'm sure you've seen Hannibal. He did that. He did American Gangster, which is incredible. He did The Counselor. I'd forgotten he had done that one. The Martian. All the Money in the World. The Last Duel. Right. So I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Point being, he shows up. People show up for Ridley Scott, and you're right. Like everyone's on the top of their game with their performances. Although behind the scenes, it sounds like this movie was just an absolute shit show to get made. Um,
Well, I mean, especially with like the cut of the film, right? Who has the final say in what goes
mhm.
where, right? So that the studio interference really screwed the movie at first, right? Um, until '07 when he got to recut it, and that's where we have the final cut, which is what we're discussing. Um,
Yeah, yeah, because I did read that if I remember correctly, the Rutger Hauer's Tears in the Rain monologue they filmed right before the studio execs were coming to seize control of
mm,
the film from Ridley Scott. Um, I believe. Don't quote me on that.
it was his idea, Rutger Hauer's idea for
Oh,
that
yeah,
speech, and the dove and holding the dove was his idea too, um, which
yeah.
I really liked. Again, a
Um,
lot of great imagery in those final moments with Rutger Hauer. Um,
you
and this is
know,
kind of when this is when you really do understand, like for me, like I felt so terrible for Rutger Hauer's character, for Batty. I felt that he was given such a disservice, and um, that in that he truly was just, I mean, yeah, obviously it was a lot of vengeance, and it was a lot of trying to get back at the people that did all this to him, but um, really, I mean, he's not a bad guy necessarily, right? Um,
yeah. I
or
mean, again,
perhaps I just like, or maybe I just like vengeance. I don't know.
well, I think we've established on the show that you like vengeance.
I do. That's true.
Um, but no, but I mean, but you're right because this is what Philip K. Dick was trying to go for. Because I did get to this part in the documentary Dangerous Days, where his daughter said that like that was really important to him of what makes us human, and
Yeah.
that in that theme. Because yeah, Roy, like you've been saying, he just wants to live. That's all he wants. He wants to exist. Like as he says to Deckard in his final monologue of, I've seen things you people won't believe. Which is so fascinating in and of itself too, because again, who's to say that he's not more human than Deckard?
Mhm.
And you know, and yeah, you do feel bad, and it seems to kind of elicit some sort of response out of Deckard too, especially because I guess his time just runs out. Um, Roy's time, and so Deckard didn't actually kill him. His time just literally ran out, and so it just. I would say Roy's death is more meant to be more somber and more. We need to think about it a little bit,
Sure.
maybe.
Maybe.
um. Okay, so I said we should save it for 2049, but you know what? Fuck it. Let's talk about it. I want to know the evidence of how is Deckard a replicant.
It's as simple as Gaff knows his dreams, right?
Oh,
Um,
of the unicorn.
the unicorn. I mean, Gaff. If Gaff knows what Deckard is dreaming without Deckard saying anything, then he's a replicant because they have access to that. They have access to his memories, his dreams, um, his his entire being, his entire self, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that Gaff makes that little, origami, um, unicorn, and Deckard looks at it and nods as if to say, like, okay, like I understand, I get it, and then he leaves, right? Um,
Yeah.
as if to acknowledge that, okay, that makes sense, right? And then again, I wish I wrote down which scene it was, but his eyes shine in one of the scenes, and I don't think that 2049 necessarily debunks it because it also implies that Deckard isn't one of those models um, that dies or stops working after 4 years, right? And who's to say that their deterioration and their aging wouldn't mimic a human's, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe they last X amount of time, right? They last
Well,
60 years maybe or whatever. And they could have it to where is I mean, in this world, you know, they're making robots that look like people, right? And that can
yeah.
trick you into thinking they're people. That's crazy, right? So who's to say that they can make it to where their deterioration looks like aging? I think that's fine, right?
Well, I
And it
mean,
also implies that replicants can make other replicants, right? And that this is a in that this is sort of a new branch of evolution in this world, right? They've
uh,
made something so sophisticated that that it can reproduce on their own, right?
well, okay. Maybe that's got some weight because, again, in 2049, Dave Bautista's character is a replicant,
Mhm.
and he's older.
Yeah,
He's an older model. I think he's like a Nexus 4. I don't remember.
I don't remember.
In his short film, we get a little bit more backstory.
I forgot about those. I need to
Um,
watch those for when we do that episode.
yeah. Well, there's three.
There's three
There's
or four. I don't remember how many there are.
there's three. There's three. Yeah, because one's animated, and that's the prequel, and then there's the one with Dave Bautista, and then the one with Jared Leto.
Right.
Um,
Jared Leto, Jesus Christ. That'll be a whole hour.
yeah. But anyway, so yeah, he's a replicant, and he's aged, and he's gotten old.
Yeah.
So I mean, that has some weight. But I don't know, man. I don't know.
I don't know. I
I
like the idea of him being a replicant. And I'm not sure why I like the idea of him being a replicant. I think I like it because
well,
he's put on the police department for a replicant to catch replicants, right?
I mean, that's what Kay does. I mean, Kay's a replicant, and that's what
That's right.
he's a Blade Runner.
That's
You
right.
know,
But Deckard doesn't know either, right? And so it's
that's
sort of
true.
like, if you want to think of it this way, um, you okay. You put on Shutter Island and you watch it for the first time all the way through, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the end, you understand what's really going on, right? So then you watch it one more time, and then you can see people's reactions to to Teddy talking to them, or Teddy mentioning something, or Teddy trying to solve the case, and their reactions make so much more sense now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe when Terrell is talking to him about Rachel not knowing that she's a replicant, he's sort of, trying to test, well, does Deckard know? Right? And
Mm-hmm.
is he trying to figure that out as well? Like, is he testing Deckard? Right? Is he
Yeah.
trying to, if he's going to catch Rachel as a replicant, will he then see it in himself as well? Because he's having to ask so many questions, right? And really dig and really figure it out, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
he able to look inward and see, right? And maybe that
Yeah.
interaction looks a little differently if you think that Deckard is a replicant. Now, as I've stated, it does not matter that he is a replicant because that doesn't. If you take it out of the story, it's the same, right? So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it adds something interesting, and it adds some. It adds a little bit of weight to the film and a little bit of nuance, but to take it away doesn't take away the movie entirely either. So it doesn't matter. I think he's a replicant. Yes. Do other people? No. Does Ridley Scott? Yes. So
Really?
really, it's like I think I'm winning because
Wait, Ridley Scott thinks has stated that he's a replicant, or
yes.
just he believes he's a replicant.
No, it one of the what are those Hollywood Reporter roundtables or whatever.
Uh-huh.
He just goes, "Oh my God, Deckard is a replicant," you know. But then again, it could be one of those situations where um, a director has their feelings about something, yet it's ambiguous enough to where what they say doesn't matter either. So,
That's true. I mean,
there could be intention, of course. Like I said, the Shiften effect, or however I said it earlier.
well, and it's the
with Deckard
scene
Fry.
in. I just googled it. The scene is when it's after Rachel saves him from Leon. You catch a little glimpse of it when he's standing behind her.
Boom. There you go.
I'll need to put the movie back on once we're done, just to kind of see, like, you know, I don't know, man. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I feel like it does add something. I don't think he's a replicant.
Cool.
I mean, but then again, the screenwriter is the same screenwriter who wrote the first movie as 2049, and of course Denis isn't gonna answer that either. So I guess
Well, it's sort
we'll
of like,
never.
yeah. I mean, are there specific reasons why you don't think he's a replicant, or do you not want him to be? That's valid also.
I don't know. I've always. I mean, again, and then after I saw 2049, I was like, okay, because I'd
Well,
heard
that's
the
what I
theory
thought
that he's
too.
a replicant.
I've thought about it a little bit more since then, but the first time I saw 2049, I go, oh, I guess he's not. That's fine, you know. Um, but of course, I'm doing my own I'm doing my own lore. I mean, this isn't like stated
Well,
anywhere.
and I am.
You know?
Well, and I am kind of reading a little bit about the argument, because that's something now, since this episode's audio only, I can do that real quick. But they're saying that, like, yeah, of course people have been arguing if he's a human or a replicant, and apparently in the theatrical release there's a voiceover where Deckard mentions his ex-wife and that he's divorced,
Hmm.
but that has been removed in obviously the different versions, especially the final cut. So the voiceover has been removed in subsequent versions, and so this detail is not mentioned. If the viewer takes the perspective that Deckard is a replicant, then the ex-wife only becomes an implanted memory.
Valid.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, dude, there's a whole fucking synopsis about is he a human or a replicant. I'm not
Yeah.
getting into that.
Well,
I'm not gonna.
to me, it's like, then why do the unicorn thing at all? You know,
Yeah.
because like then it's nonsense. If it means nothing, then why put it in there, right? So
Yeah, and why is it such a big deal that for the final cut it was
right.
reinserted back into the film?
But again, it could just be like, I don't know. I would have no other reason to think why Gaff would know anything about that. Right?
That's true. Also, we should mention, I just realized, Gaff is Edward James Olmos's character.
Yeah, Gaff is Edward James, who just seemingly just pops up, which also leads me to believe Gaff may be like his handler.
I mean, that makes sense because he's
Again,
always
I'm
around him.
making up lore. I don't know anything. You know what I mean? Making it up.
Well, like I said, that makes sense because the only time we don't see Gaff is, of course, in the final confrontation with Pris and Roy until the very end. We don't see him during the initial interrogation with Rachel. We know he's there at the Tyrell Corporation,
Mhm.
but he's not in the room.
Right.
So I mean that makes sense. I mean, who knows?
Who knows?
I guess we're gonna have to just call Ridley Scott on the phone.
Yeah, I'll get him on the line. I'll text him. Here's.
All right, Jeremy, are you ready to wrap up?
I am. Yeah, I do love this movie. I agree that it's a little slow in places. But of course, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's still really, really good, and there's a reason why people still talk about it today. So, and I think it's only enhanced by 2049 as well. Like, I think that 2049 kind of elevates Blade Runner to a higher standard, in my personal opinion.
I agree.
And we'll get to that when we get to 2049.
Yeah, I agree. And especially with all the other things that have come out, like Blade Runner Black Lotus, which is an anime that kind of like fits into the whole thing as well. So yeah, I think this movie's fantastic, and I think it's only enhanced by 2049, the short films and stuff like that. But yeah. So Jeremy, before you tell me what we're talking about next week,
sure.
I meant to say this at the top of the show, but I kind of forgot. So everyone, before we close out this episode and Jeremy gives us our tease for next week, just want to say that this hopefully should be the last audio only episode of season 10. This is, however, the final episode recorded in our own old apartment. So
it's exciting.
Yeah, so hopefully going forward next week with Jeremy's next pick, Ashley and I will be in our new apartment. We'll switch back to video, and there we go. And then we'll see if the views dip.
We'll see.
Yeah,
they might.
So Jeremy, you said off mic that you figured out what we're gonna do next week. So what are we talking about next week, buddy?
All right. Next week, we are. I'm excited. Next week we are going to be discussing the. What year? That's a good question, Jer. And it also doesn't matter. I don't know why. I don't know why that we always do that. Anyway, next week we are going to be discussing the 2023 epic saga by Ari Aster, Beau is Afraid.
Let's fucking go.
So hope you're ready, because it's a doozy. And I personally love this movie very much.
So I think I made it well known on our Hereditary episode. I'm not a fan of Ari Aster. His horror is just not my brand of horror. I mean, my wife, you, Alex, Emily, you guys all love Midsommar.
Of course. So good.
It's just not my brand of horror. But something about Beau is Afraid really, really piqued my interest. Does that make me want to see Hereditary and Midsommar? Absolutely not. But I did really want to see this. I didn't get the opportunity to, but I'm glad we're going to talk about it. And I think I know why. And I'll leave it with this. I think I know why Ari Aster's not my cup of tea when it comes to horror films. Because for him, they're not horror films, you know. Hereditary was a family drama. Midsommar was a breakup story. Yeah. And I'm like, no, say it what they are. They're horror films. But Beau is Afraid is a dark comedy. And I remember grilling you about it, like, is it actually a dark comedy? And you're like, yes, it is a dark comedy. I'm like, okay, as long as he's not trying to pull some fuckery on us, I'm down. So I'm very excited.
There's a heavy dose of surrealism in there also.
That's fine. I remember seeing the trailer and I was like, oh, we're going to get surreal with this. Let's go.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Joaquin Phoenix, of course, is, of course, incredible. A couple of Joaquin Phoenix movies come in this season, so this will be the first one. So
nice.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode on Blade Runner, and we will see you next week for Beau is Afraid.